In India, we are sitting on the potential that we cannot even dream of. If you see what happens in China, you can predict your future.
Is there something else? Is there something that we are missing? What can we learn from China? Like as founders.
So people think that China is a copycat economy. This is the number of patent applications by China. So when you say that India has startups and they are very innovative and so on, just see those numbers. But let me give you some interesting factoid. The trade between China and ASEAN is greater than the trade between the US and the EU.
Wow. आप आदि बहुत आइडिया दे रहे हो. I can already see a very cool razor coming out जिसमें handle पे लिखा है Me Marathi from Shantanu.
If we see someone who's driving a BMW, we look pityingly at him. कितना बेवकूफ है. He is driving a car that is 20% of the quality of the car that I drive. And second, it is at double the price. It's a critical framework because if you get this framework right, that defines the structure of your sales and marketing team. The business goes up in an exponential way because these are multiplicated. People say, why are these Chinese companies winning? The answer is this.
Hi everyone, welcome to episode 35 of the Asymmetric podcast. Today we have a really special guest. Adi Sehgal has been a close friend, mentor to Bombay Shaving Company ever since his investment into Bombay Shaving Company as COO at Reckitt. He was president there, managed a 12 to 14 billion dollar business, and always had a reputation that preceded him of being an exceptional thinker on everything business. So I think Adi is, just put his imprint on his intellectual, emotional, and personal imprint on a lot of things that are interesting and important to founders. Particularly two topics. One, which we're going to cover today, is the entire China story. What happened in China since their liberalization in 1979? What are the macro factors? What it is culturally to be a founder or a citizen of China, or even what it means to be a government functionary there. I think Adi has had a lived experience of almost a decade building a business, and Adi has been kind enough to, of course, agree to a two-part asymmetric presence, with part two being an episode deeply involving AI, which will come to probably a week or two from now. But Adi, welcome to the Asymmetric podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time, and we are super thrilled to engage with you. So thank you so much for taking the time.
So interestingly, today only Chamath has put out a post. Have you ever wondered why all companies, independent of size, all seem to have the same org chart? He's making this long post about that mostly system of records have been similar type of companies. Hence, software decides your choice of org chart,
Correct.
not the company.
Totally right. And one of the things about you guys as founders is one of the key decisions you need to make is what is your org structure, therefore what is your business structure. And then as you go forward, depending on 0 to 1 or 1 to 10 or 10 to 100, how that needs to change. And then who are the people who can make that shift and how? How do you help them?
When you had told me this, revenue growth, profit growth and working capital growth, and it should apply to a channel person versus a marketing person versus a supply chain versus HR, I had gone back to the org saying, hey, we should do this. Let's find what these three are given our stage and what we want to incentivize as behavior to our people. And we actually went through the process. It was damn hard to find something that worked at our scale. I still want to kind of get to a place where we can do this with a high level of predictability across the organization, but it was just damn hard to do it.
I think there are two very different axes that you are struggling with. One of the first axis I think is relatively, in my opinion, easy because your company structure is the same. It's not very different from how a Reckitt country would be. The issue that you want to really talk about is a bigger issue, which is how do you calibrate your what good looks like in a fast growing startup. And I think the answer to that has to be that as a founder, you have to anchor to something. So at the start of, and the second question is the period. So the first thing is as a founder, you may say that, look, I think 20% growth or 50% growth this year is great. Now, actually you grow 100%, then maybe you need to have the, honesty to say, I had said 20%. It's actually turned out to be 100%. And we've done very well, right? And in that scenario, maybe because it's a very high growth business, at 50%, there is a certain reward, but you don't cap it, right? You basically set it up and say that if it goes to 75, 100, 200, this is how the reward moves. And so people know what they're going to get out of it, and there's always an incentive to grow faster. So that's one. The other thing you can do is you can change the pace of the organization. And this is something that's so important and people don't seem to get. One of the most important things to think about how to scale a business is the organization cycle speed. And we'll come back to this for China, because people say, why are these Chinese companies winning? The answer is this, amongst other things, but the most important answer is organizational cycle speed. And what they are doing is essentially they are speeding up the organization cycle much faster. So you can also say that, listen, I'm not going to give you a full year target because I don't know what it's going to be, but I damn well know that in the next quarter, we are going to achieve 50%. If you achieve this, then you get whatever number of points. And then next quarter, I may give you 50, I may give you 30, I may give you 100, depending on what it's going. And now suddenly your targets are more, achievable. But of course, this requires a lot of target setting, and you require an industry to do it. And of course, you can use AI to solve for most industries.
Organization cycle, I heard today only that in India, public companies report their earnings year on year. Startups do it quarter on quarter, but in China, startups are doing it week on week. So if you just change that nobody would report a week on week growth of 1%. So you're forced to think more at how do I do faster growth. Maybe that changes the design, but I don't know if that is true also. Adi would let us know.
We'll come to this. So, I spend a lot of time thinking about what's happening I've left China. I used to live in China for 7-8 years. I've left China for the last 10. But I make sure I'm well connected, because I feel that if you see what's happening in China and you learn what's happening in China, it really gives you a superpower, because you can predict the future. And to some extent, the same is true of America, but more of China, in my opinion, where whatever happens in China today will happen in America 3 years later, Europe 7-8 years later, India maybe between 2 and 7, depending on which category or whatever. So if you see what happens in China, you can predict your future. And the first point I want to make to you is, if you compare China and India, you need to set a start point for both. And in my opinion, the start point is the year of liberalization. So China liberalized in 1979. And what the story there is that there was this leader they had called Deng Xiaoping, and he went down to a totally communist country just after Mao. And he goes down to this town of Shenzhen, which is a mega city, megalopolis today, but then was just a collection of huts. And in typical cryptic, Chinese whispers, he says one line which changed the world. And the line was, to be rich is glorious. To be rich is glorious. That's the only thing he said. When he said that, in any case, China, like India, is full of entrepreneurs. And these people sniffed the direction of the wind. And they were like, yeah, this sounds like a good idea. We've been poor for so long, so let's be rich. And then that started this process of liberalization. In the case of India, it was Narasimha Rao, Manmohan Singh. And the delta between these two is about 15 years, 1979 to 1992 or 1991, 92, 93. So if you take both of those points as a start point, I want to show you a chart. So this one chart shows you the GDP in $1 trillion of China and India from liberalization, year 1 to year 32. Year 32 in China was 2007. Year 32 in India was 2022.
This is the first time I'm seeing this chart. Everyone always shows the India is
They don't have a
15
common
years
starting
behind
point.
China.
Yeah.
It's very interesting to see.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So this
This is almost identical.
it is identical.
Yeah.
Adi,
Yeah. Though there was a little steeper curve in China after this, from what I understand.
Yeah.
we'll get an extension and that you can actually say, okay, this is where it is headed.
I'll come to that next. But the other point I wanted to make to you was, before we started recording, I was telling you guys about S curves and about how human beings cannot compute S curves. I was telling you that every business grows on this S curve. It's not every business, every distributor, every business, every country, you put bacteria into a petri dish, you blow air into a balloon. The growth of everything follows this exponential curve. Let's not call it an S curve because it becomes an S curve, but to begin with, it is kind of an exponential curve. And the crazy thing is you can't get to where you are in year 30 without going through the pain and grind that you had to go through to get there. And so therefore going through the valleys makes it possible to create the hills later. Now, there is a very interesting way to think about this. What speeds up these S curves? And we'll come to this also. So what happens here is that you're going like this, but actually it's not straight. What you do is you try something, you learn, you try, get results, learn, change, try, get results, learn, change. So this is a series of these things, and it's this better knowledge and learning that takes you up the performance curve. So if you can speed up that cycle of try, learn, change, your S curve, instead of going up in years, starts going up in weeks, starts going up in months, starts going up in days. But the shape of the growth is always the same. You can just change the unit of time at
X-axis.
the X-axis, right? So now this happened to China. So if you go further, the first 30 years that happened, it went to close to 4 trillion. And then the next 15 years, it went to 17 trillion or 19 trillion. And that's the nature of S curves. So when you are sitting at 4 trillion, which is here, you are thinking, oh, we've done well. It's good. And you are planning the next 3 or 4 years or 15, 10, 15, 5% growth as a company. And you're saying, yeah, it's not going to get fast. It's impossible for it to get faster than it is today. But guess what? The natural thing is for it to get faster. So what ends up happening is, because if you're a company who's going on this trajectory, right? And now you're sitting here and you're like let's say this is a 3.5 means you have a 350 crore business. It's gone from zero over whatever number of years. So now are you thinking that I'm going to put in resources and try and grow even faster? No, you're saying, Arey, mera to 350 crore ka business ho gaya. If I overcommit and if I overspend, to meri to lag jayegi. So I don't want to tell my boss or my shareholders. So you tend to underinvest. So at a time when your business could take off because awareness and availability is now getting to be strong, you tend to underplay and be cautious. But if you are not cautious and if you basically keep driving, you get those kind of results, and you should expect those kind of results. Now, will India achieve the same as this? Who knows? Probably not, because India is in a different world. When it is growing, when China was growing, everybody wanted Chinese product. For this scale of growth to happen for a billion population country, you need to create products or services which need to be consumed by 12 billion people around the world for them to have enough weight to drive this kind of growth. In the case of India, we don't have the manufacturing industry. We have service industries which are likely to be disrupted with AI, and we'll come back to that. So it's going to be much more difficult. So if you think about what that means, India in the next 15 years, if it achieves what China did, can become a 17 trillion economy. If it achieves 80%, if you take a discount, it can still become a 14 trillion economy. And if it achieves half of what China did, will still become a 10 trillion economy. Even if it becomes only a 10 trillion economy, there is a dramatic growth that is going to happen. So what does this growth look like? So here is this very badly formatted chart. And I have another chart. If you want, I can show you the skyline of what Shanghai looked like in 1999. 1979, 2011, and 2023. And you think it can't grow, and it gets better and better. I have a chart with the skyline of Bombay also, right, which shows the same trend. So here, if you look at number of skyscrapers, 1979, 10. 2007, which is the first 30 years, 1,300, went to 3,500. Urban, high-speed rail, 00, went to 42,000 kilometers. Highways, 5,000, 50,000, 160. Let's look at air conditioners, 1%, 30%, 70%. Cars per 1,000 people, from 1 to 24 to 210. Value of the apparel market, from 1 to 50 to 350 in $1 billion. Shoe industry, 0.5 to 20 to 90. Number of cars sold, 0.1 to 5 to 28 million. So now, in a sense, where you are sitting in India is this 2007 number. And what is going to come is this delta between 2007 and 2024, and you can discount that by 50%. So in India, we are sitting on the potential that we cannot even dream about. Of course, there are issues, there are risks, and we can discuss all of those.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I just love these charts because, Adi, you will be, I don't know if you'll be surprised to know, but a lot of VCs here are podcast. They are smacking their lips saying, Naya LP chart mil gaya.
So this is what happens then. So let's take a couple of charts just to frame this, what the situation is like in China at the moment. So this is, and some of this data is 21, 22, 20. It doesn't matter. The concepts are right. And again, on this also, I've written a long Substack, like 100-page thing on what really is happening in China after I spent a week there in November. So this is what happened to GDP at purchasing power parity, right? So you can see China versus the US. And you can see on the real economy as well, there is a forecast which keeps moving that the US, that China will become the largest economy in the world. May be true, may not be true, but the direction of both of those, the fact that it's a super significant economy is of course clear. But it's not just about the economy. You can see what happens to the country. Look at the life expectancy. Today, China has a higher life expectancy than the US on average. Look at
This I didn't know. Huh? I didn't know that China's life expectancy is now more than US.
Yeah.
What's happened? This is post-COVID. It's just plummeted, right? The US numbers.
Post-COVID, it's plummeted. And well, the latest year, is it higher or not? I don't know. But I think the key thing to say here is that it is in the same ballpark, right? So China, even though it still remains a developing country in many, many ways, on the whole, they managed to uplift their people. They have a 99% literacy rate. They have a situation where it's a cold country, China. Everything north of the Yangtze River is heated. There's no home. There are no kacha homes. You go to even 15 years ago, you go to the smallest village in China. There are only pakka homes. So again, I would say India is going to go in that same direction, right? The way India is.
But Adi, on this, the most common pushback I hear is the inclusivity of growth. Somehow China has figured out a way to make the growth more inclusive across its 1.5 billion people.
No, we'll come to that. I have a chart.
ऐसा नहीं है क्या?
I have a chart on the Gini coefficient. So there is this myth. Okay,
sure.
It's not a myth. There is a thought that China is a communist country, and let me see if I can find that chart for you first. Wait a second. Yeah. So look at this. This is a top 10% ownership of national income and wealth. So China, both income and wealth, looks like the US.
It's almost like any capitalist nation.
Not almost. It is the most capitalist nation. So people think that China is a communist country, and maybe it's called the Communist Party, but actually it's not. It's the Communist Party is the most meritocratic thing in the history of the world. We can come back to that. But also, what is the characteristic of a socialist country? Social expenditure, right? Social welfare. Okay, look at this chart.
Social benefits as a percentage of GDP, only Mexico is lower than China.
Yeah. And China is half the US.
So they are essentially pushing the country into saying that aap kaam karo, GDP badhao. There's enough income opportunities. They're not going to get any benefits as such.
So China ki kahani ye hai ki they are, remember there is a Chinese dream. What is the Chinese dream? For the last, if you think of it from their perspective, for the last 3,000 years in history, other than an 300-year period where they feel they've been, colonized, crushed, demeaned, they have been the biggest GDP on the planet by far, the biggest civilization on the planet. So China has the way the Chinese language works is that you have a very long view of time. So you can talk about the first emperor who built the Great Wall in whatever 100 BC or whatever it is, in the same tense as if the person is there today. So in a sense, when the UK had a deal with China which says we're going to give back Hong Kong in 99 years, the UK was saying, oh, that's such a long time, and China was saying, oh, that's such a short time. So from that perspective, they have a lot of patience, and it is about how we are going to uplift the whole society. There's most of China, dominant religion is atheism, but there is a very strong sense of the Chinese community and how that needs to be uplifted and so on. So there's a lot of individual growth that comes, but there's also some level of collective feeling in that country. So what happens in China is that if you look at all the job generation that's happened in the last 20 years, the number of jobs in the public sector are flat or may even have gone down. The entire job creation has been created in the private sector, mostly by small MSME industries, in the drive to get rich themselves and then uplift their communities and people. And these things that were small MSMEs are today the BYDs of the world. After doing those iterative learning loops over a period of 25 years with unlimited demand coming from China, from the US, and this huge, national focus on getting rich. So in China, they're quite commercial. It's almost like Gujarati Sindhi kind of mindset that we need to make money. And there's also a feeling that I'm responsible for myself. I'm responsible for paying for my family. It's not that they expect the government is going to come and rescue them. So they're hardworking people. And that, I think, accounts for some of this. But so China is very misunderstood in many ways. So let's quickly go over a couple of other things.
So totally understood the focus of the government. Now, is that something that has translated to how startups also have evolved in the country and the workforce mindset, essentially? Like a lot of times we have seen I think in the last 10 years, whenever there was a question mark on, we get a lot of grief on work-life balance. Shantanu has his infamous post of 18-hour workforce, and obviously Mr. Murthy's chided enough for his 70-hour workforce. But China celebrated for the 996 culture, right? 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and 6 days a week. And what essentially you're saying is that culturally the people in the country are very pro fending for themselves, and therefore in some ways they may not be okay with it, but it's not so much of a grief for them to work such work hours, and therefore startups have a distinct advantage to move fast. Or is there something else?
No, I don't think it's that Chinese people intrinsically want to work harder than any other kind of people, or there's anything very different. People are people everywhere, right? And in China also, it's just a different contract. So if you see what the government is doing in China, the government is setting the agenda. So the government basically in the 2015 to 2020 period, they have these 5-year plans. And these 5-year plans, they have themes. So there was a theme 5-10 years ago, which was talking about the large industries of the future are climate focused, right? So solar cell, batteries, electric cars. And we need to uplift ourselves from low-level manufacturing and basically go into high-tech, high-level manufacturing and R&D in these areas. So even when I was in China 10, 12 years ago, we've had conversations with cities in which our factories were, where they were like, look, you guys are relatively low-tech business, and we are going to try and make ourselves more green and whatever. These are the things that you need to do. There's some places where they wanted to relocate our factories to other areas because they wanted that area for something else. And these are all commercial discussions that you have with the government. And basically, there are lots of incentives and they'll work in that direction, but they'll also frame what the narrative is. So in the last 5-year thing, they've talked about this thing called common prosperity. So common prosperity is similar to what you have in the US and the West, where because income inequalities are rising, the question is how can we actually grow in a more inclusive fashion? And then the government will set in place rules and systems and incentives more than anything else, and maybe some disincentives sometimes, to try and nudge people in that direction. This is one of the reasons why the Chinese startup ecosystem has kind of tanked in the last 5 or 6 years, because it is no longer sexy to be a billionaire startup founder in China without taking care of all your other stakeholders. So the people are asking, what are you doing for your other stakeholders? So I think that's one of the things to be aware of in China. Second, this wolf warrior culture that they have, it's very niche. It's in very specific areas that are very competitive. But in general, I remember a conversation I had with the mayor of a city. And the mayor tells me this. He says, look, and this is a Communist Party official. He's got 15 years of experience. He's come from the bottom. And when I said it's a meritocracy, remember that in China, the way you get into government is by passing an exam called the GoKwik, which is like the most difficult exam in the world, much more difficult than our IIT or IAS. And you have 10 million students take this exam, and there are 3,000 seats, and the top 3,000 seats are the people who go into the base level of the Communist Party government system. So if somebody is a mayor, this person has come through that and has had 15 years of service, where his KPIs are not about how many bribes he's taken, but his KPIs are, he told me his KPIs, he says, I have KPIs on 3 levels for my city. First, GDP. Second, happiness and satisfaction of people there. And I'm looking to create a city where people can live, work, and play. And if you go to Chinese cities, you can see it. It is live, work, and play. So it is not this, people from who've never been there think it's this dull kind of culture. There'll be people in these gray, clothes, riding cycles. And it's not like that at all. It is intensely vibrant. People have dramatic levels of self-expression and, vibrancy on social media and in real life. Of course, there are bound.
But that's a huge, not misconception, huge perception
something
that
changed,
it's an
Shantanu.
unhappy. It's
No.
unhappy and with no
Something
control. You
changed.
cannot speak up.
2000 से 2020 तक, till COVID, from what I understand, it was let's go for glory. But I don't know what's changed in the last 5 years, Adi. You may know better. Well, right? They went after these billionaires who were not pro-China. I think Alibaba tried to list a subsidiary in the US, and like Didi, the ride-hailing company, was not allowed to list. They took the app off. So anything that was seen as not nationalist really got screwed. So I think it's almost like they don't allow dollar now inflow. Like all VC funds are leaving. There's no US investing in China. What changed is very unclear to me.
So what changed is very much a mindset of government. So basically the feeling was that we are getting all this growth, but we are getting this growth in a way that is very non-inclusive. So, and this was the whole common prosperity thing. So I'll give an example of an industry, which was this education tutoring industry. So this was a massive industry, right? And there were all kinds of startups all over this industry. And all of these people were basically tutoring people for this exam that I told you about. And they were making thousands of dollars per student, and people were willing to pay because people in China have incomes. Most important thing is the education of your child. So you will spend whatever you need to spend. And then what was happening was people who were coming through this had an unfair advantage on people who were poorer. So the government overnight one day said, this ain't happening. This industry, you cannot have this. So all the VC money in that all tanked overnight. So the thing with the government there is they can take very quick decisions, and they don't really care about, $100 billion here or $50 billion there. These are all very small things in the national calculus, the way they see it, but this can be quite disorienting for investors. So, and I think maybe China overplayed its hand, and where it thought that its hand was much stronger than it was. And also a lot of the growth that is now coming in China are in industries where China has a technology IP advantage. I'll show you that in a second. And they don't necessarily want external investors in this as well. So let's come back to this, but I just want to make a couple of other points. So people also have this feeling that China has really slowed down. China is a disaster. China is really struggling. These Trump tariffs are really hurting China. And the answer, as in everything else, is only partially true. So this is the growth rate of everybody. So forget the forecast, which is a JP Morgan forecast for 2029. Look at the 24 number, 4.8%. The 25 number year to date is 5.5%. In contrast, the US, which is supposed to be growing so fast, is growing at 2%, 2.5%. So the economy is not that different, 26 trillion and 19 trillion. And China, when it grows at 5% on a $19 trillion economy, it adds 35% of an India every year. Right? So this is the slow avatar of China, adding 30% of India in a year. So it's not really that slow. If you just think about how many cars, how many services, how much they need to do to maintain this growth at that base, it's quite incredible. So if you were looking at it zero-based, you would be saying, oh my God, China is growing so fast. But because you have this media thing, which you're caught up in the narrative, nobody thinks about the numbers. Right? Now, if you go a bit further, okay. And why is that happening? Well, one of the reasons is this. This is the change in US sentiment towards China. And you can see what happened in 2017. That's where Mr. Trump first started. Right? So China.
So it seemed like China was like, okay, my read is there was a globalization of economy. China realized that we could participate in this globalization by creating a manufacturing machinery and getting all of China to prosperity, and we will manufacture for the world. As soon as people started becoming more nationalistic and started shutting down the globalist policies, which is what Trump is trying to do now as well, right? In some sense, कि let's make locally. अब बनेगा कि नहीं locally पता नहीं, पर बोलो tariff डाल दो करके. At least there is a level playing field. उस चीज में they are realizing that now the next 20-30 years, it's almost seeming like if every nation is going to go, like India did that, right? India said we should not import from China. Now US is saying that. What will happen to Europe, we don't know, right? They anyway hardly have any GDP growth. So if the largest growing economies and the largest economies don't want to work with China, China is like, let's focus on our own and play the long game. It's okay to now not try to just do low-cost manufacturing. It's okay to grow a little slower because we are now very sizable as an economy, but let's have a more inclusive growth when we have it, which is largely around still moving to higher up the chain in manufacturing. AI also looks at, if I look at the amount of infrastructure they fund in Africa or in Southeast Asia, also enabling all of these economies. It almost seems that, there is this, I forget the name of these two individuals. I'd heard them. Sorry?
The Belt and Road Initiative.
Yeah. So, but I'd heard these two individuals where there's something people like to be a local, I forget the word, right? Ki they want to control their part of the world. And US did that for a long amount of time. If you see World War I, World War II, Cold War, etc., NATO, effectively, they wanted to control dollar being the global currency reserve, etc. And I think China now wants to flex its muscles to say that, A, we will grow large, but we will also fundamentally want to control as many countries and have like a nexus where हमारे बिना उन countries की GDP growth मुश्किल हो जाएगी. Like we will fund the GDP growth and make some countries dependent on us. That's like the long game.
I have a slight twist in that narrative, and I'll tell you what I said. First,
sure.
Let's go to the start of what you said. So China decided one day to become big as a manufacturing powerhouse. Actually, what happened was China did not know how to become big. China just had this thing: we have a lot of people, and we are open for business, and we joined the WTO. It is American companies to begin with and European companies who figured out that China they have qualified people and they have the raw materials and they have the capability. So they came and set up factories here to begin with, and that set up the start of the infrastructure. So you're a car company, you're producing in Chicago, and now you realize that you can produce for 30% of the price in China.
Because they wanted low cost labor.
So that was the role of China to begin with. But what happened over time is that this hollowed out America. So if you go into the south side of Chicago, for example, it looks like a devastated place. It feels like you're driving through Syria or something like that. I've been to these places which look bombed out almost. It's that bad. And that backlash is what is now causing these issues, because now people want these jobs reshored, even though they themselves may not want to work in a car factory anymore. So, but in concept, they want them back in America, right? But what happened in China was the starting building point. And then China built expertise. They built an ecosystem. They built all the ancillary parts. And all of this actually was done by the private sector. It's not government. It's not state-owned enterprise. And then what eventually happened with China is China used to be 30% urban like India, 70% rural. And there used to be because to become prosperous, as countries become prosperous, people move from rural to urban. So there were 15 million people moving every year from rural to urban China. And remember one thing about China, if you remember anything at all, China's primary focus is inward looking. China was, even when it in the 1200 AD or whatever it was, never wanted to engage with anyone outside. So, and you can see this in the name. So China, if you see the name, is like a rectangle and a line in the middle. It's called the Middle Kingdom. But what that middle means, the rectangle is world, middle means center of the world. So the Chinese see themselves and even write themselves as the center of the world. So for many Chinese people, there is no aspiration that says, oh, I want to go and live in America. It's such a fantastic country. There is for many also, because there are so many people. But for the vast majority of Chinese, why would they go away from the best place in the world to some crappy place somewhere else, just searching for some money or whatever, right? So China, a lot of what you see in China is about maintaining internal harmony. So now you have this party, Communist Party, who has control over China for so many years. But the way that contract works is, I help my people increase their quality of life. I give them a better life. I give them a place to work, play, and live. I give them better life expectancy. I give them more challenging jobs. I give them purpose in life. And in return, they don't challenge the way that the country is governed. So the party remains in power. So what ends up happening is, now you've got 15 million people coming from rural China to urban China. You need to give those people employment. If you don't give those people employment, you have unrest. If you have unrest, it's not good for the party or for anybody, actually. So to get them jobs, you will invest in creating the infrastructure that allows industries to be created, which they did. So 15 million people coming in corresponded to a 10% GDP growth every year for so many years. And it absorbed all those jobs. 70, 80, 100, 200 million jobs later, you now have this massively skilled workforce who needs to continue to have jobs. Otherwise, there will be unrest. So China's number one focus always is the prosperity of its people and looking inwards. They, in my opinion, they couldn't care less about going and controlling anybody. The only reason they are interested in controlling or appearing to control anybody is the making sure that their supply chains are secure, that they get their minerals from Africa or Australia. But they don't want to go and, you don't, in China, when you live there, nobody ever talks to you about going and occupying, some other country. That's not the discourse at all internally. It's all about how do we maintain this system that the Communist Party in a sense is on a tiger, right? And the tiger is the Chinese system. Cannot jump off the tiger because the tiger may eat it up. So it has to. So this is the reason that this happens. So if you look at the top, that's 2000, and blue is countries where America was the dominant trading partner. And that is 2018, and that is countries where China is the dominant trading partner. Of course. So I will show you the numbers in a minute. So in the case of India, there's $110 billion of trade approximately, out of which 100 billion is China to India and less than 10 billion is India to China. But that's also maybe because of protectionism, but actually that's both ways. It's much more because Indian products are not competitive in China, and we can come back to that. But for people who think that China is going to get crushed by these American sanctions, actually China has been working very hard for many years because they knew this was coming. So you may not believe this fact, but let me give you some interesting factoid. The trade between China and ASEAN is greater than the trade between the US and the EU.
Wow. Like developing economies with much smaller GDPs are able to do a lot more trade with China.
So China has a trade with everybody. China is the number one trading partner of everybody excepting USA, Canada, and Mexico. And therefore, American trade as a proportion of China's total trade is very small. So let me illustrate that to you. So this is the importance of Chinese trade to the world. You can see imports and exports, about 15% of world trade. Here you can see the balance of payments, right? So you can see US 340 billion compared to 500 billion from China, 100 billion imported from America. I also have a chart which I can show you if you want about the nature of things that are exported. So America's primary exports, yes, there are some airplanes and there are some things, but America's primary exports are things that you would expect a third world country to export. Petroleum is the biggest export that America has. Agricultural products. Yes, there is about 100 billion of planes and high tech, but it's very small. China, the majority of export today is high tech. Now, if you look at EU, again, you can see that China, EU. Now look at ASEAN, how big that trade is. Look at Japan, South Korea. And the only countries where China has a negative balance of trade is Taiwan and South Korea, really. And that is because of semiconductors. But if you go further, now this red chart here is showing you the US goods import by market. Okay. So you can see from 2018.
Just fallen off a cliff, huh?
Yes.
Absolute fallen off a cliff.
But it's fallen off. So the Chinese have. But the interesting thing to note is it's not just fallen off a cliff in 2024 when Trump came in. It's continuing the same trend. So the Chinese have planned for this. This was their base scenario. So in spite of this drop in trade, China is still going to continue to grow at 5% as an economy. Makes no difference because they have already planned for it. And they have compensated by increasing the strength of trading relationships elsewhere, large enough to
with others
balance the American deficit. And if you go forward, this is now showing you on the right. So you can see how the trade has fallen to America. You can see that the Chinese trade is not growing at the same rate as before. Chinese export. It's not declined as well. It's still growing in spite of the drop to America. And I can also argue
It's basically eaten everyone else.
yes.
Yeah, everybody else is dropping. No, the US. But what is more interesting is, Shantanu, what Adi said, right? Ki if you move from a agri economy to after the industrial revolution, we were largely cars and planes and stuff like that. And then fundamentally, there's a technology economy, right? Like, what is our biggest export? IT services, right? That was the software exports as such. But now the world is moving more to semiconductors, high tech, precision engineering. And if it is raw material, it will remain petroleum, but also maybe rare earths, right? Because in the end, if you think of all the AI chips that are getting made, by design, they need GPUs, and GPUs need semiconductors. And, you just go back in the chain to understand what is going to be most valuable. And in the world of unlimited, I don't know if you've seen this, the energy sufficiency of China is largely now dependent on solar, also nuclear, the number of nuclear plants that they are putting. Because see, agar electricity sufficient ho gaya, energy sufficient ho gaye, then your petroleum dependency also comes down. And I mean, US and India are, I think, investing more into solar. China has done solar, but their nuclear power capacity seems to be like off the charts right now. I don't know if you have some data on that, Adi.
This is the one.
No, this consumption of energy. So renewables is effectively becoming a massive part, plus nuclear as well. And you're reducing your dependency on oil and coal, which effectively reduces your dependency on every other country for that matter. Like whether we run out of oil or coal or not, that's always a big debate. Let's assume we never run out of oil. But fundamentally, the luck of the draw, like तुम्हारे पास oil नहीं है तो यार तुम क्यों गरीब रहोगे?
नहीं, but
dependency हटा दो ना.
That's not the primary driver for China. So what's happening with China right now is, while this chart looks very nice, this is a percentage chart. When you make this into absolutes, what's happening is that essentially fossil fuels, which is coal and oil, is flat in China. It's not declining because the energy needs are climbing so rapidly. So all the incremental energy is coming from here. So what China, and China, by the way, is more than self-sufficient in coal. So it's only oil, which is the issue for as far as China is concerned. And there is no problem with oil because they can get as much oil as they want from Russia also. So the reason for them making this shift actually is not necessarily only a supply chain constraint. The reason they're making the shift is this. So this is a country where 7 years ago, they said, we are going to fix the environment. We understand how much impact it is. Remember the whole thing about making it a better world for themselves. This picture below is what Beijing used to be when I used to live there. And this picture on top is the picture from 2022. This has been recognized as the Beijing miracle by the UN. In 2022, Beijing had 288 clear sky days like that one. In 2007, it had something like 300 and something smoggy days like the one below. So this is Delhi and Delhi's future 25 years later, if we can make it happen. So it is all up. So this country is a country that has a forward-thinking plan, which goes for the next 25 years. So the industries that they are putting in massive money in, for them, the Manhattan project is semiconductor, but not just. It's green cars, it's batteries, it's energy. So it's fusion, it's nuclear, it's quantum computing. It's those kinds of things. And I've got a full analysis also, if you're interested, which compares each of these on competitiveness with the US and where the Chinese situation is. But if you look at one thing which I will show you, so people think that China is a copycat economy. and it was at some point, this is R&D expenditure as a percentage of GDP, but this is the number of patent applications by China and every other country in the world. So when you say that India has startups and they are very innovative and so on, just see those numbers. China had 1.6 million patents, which was more than US plus Japan put together. And India has entered this list at 64,000 patents in the year. Now, if you assume that filing a patent has some correlation to some invention, which country is the most inventive country at the moment?
Yep.
China is probably more than all from 2 to 10 put together.
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
But Adi, tell me this, like, I think this is clearly a cultural nuance, like you said, the Communist Party of China, there's one party that thinks 25, 30 years ahead and puts in policies or governs in that manner, right? How have you seen startup founders in your experience in China take, like, there is a nationalistic pride. Yes, I think India also has it. A lot of us are very, like, right? But there is somehow a cultural nuance where we have seen the value creation of Chinese startups be at a very different level than compared to what, we do. Whether it's like going back to the 996 culture or whether it's just the sheer need to win. Or is there something else? Is there something that we are missing? What can we learn from China? Like as founders?
Or is it
Yes.
just the long-term orientation which you said that
No,
99
no.
years also?
It's not the long-term. It's not the long-term orientation. So founders in China are like founders everywhere else. They have to survive for the next 3 months in a hyper-competitive market, right? And it's a market that's totally unforgiving. So as you saw, it's not a communist country where people are going to give you the dole. You have to fight with extremely smart people with a population that is extremely discerning. So what is the playbook for winning in China? So in preparation for this podcast, I actually put some thought into this and I actually put together a few charts. So I can show you the charts and we can chat around them. So So here is a playbook for 10 drivers of success in China. So the first thing, iteration speed as strategy. And this I'm now moving very much from a country lens to almost a company and brand lens, and we'll bring this back to what Indian starters can have. So you have that at the bottom, use case for Indian starters. So what China does is dramatic innovation and speed. So let me give you a specific example from my old life. We used to have a brand called Mofree. Reckitt still has a brand called Mofree in America. This brand was a brand of supplements. It does, glucosamine, chondroitin, these kind of things. And a very nice, solid brand, $100 million kind of business in America, growing well, 5, 6, 7%. And has a strong multinational kind of innovation pipeline, like 1 or 2 or 3 big innovations a year, brand restage, like that. So when we launched it in China, we started with cross-border. The Chinese team and the Chinese, there's a very interesting Chinese partner, basically said, listen, we need at least 5 innovations in every segment of this thing every year. And we were, as a company, or the Americans were like, oh, that's too much. Why would you need that? Because how can you even execute it? And they're like, look, I know some of these things can die, but we need to do this. So what happened was we pushed the thing and eventually we got a pipeline of 5 and the next year 5 and then 10 and then 15 and 50% of these things died. But now think what happened. You had, let's say, 2 products to begin with. Now you added 5 in the first year. In America, you added 1. So in America, you had 3. But in China, you added 5, 2 died. So now you had 5. The year after, China now had 7. America had 3. The year after, China had 12. Over a 5-year period, it diverged dramatically. And because for each product, you get learnings, you get insights, you get some consumer awareness, you find a way to, you start asking the question, how do I bring my range together? What is the higher order benefit? Which one should I promote? How should I promote? You end up building a much stronger ecosystem with much more insights. And because, so there is this very old experiment. The experiment is there are 2 groups of students. They are both given the same amount of clay. One group of students is told that your job, my friend, is you're in competition. Your job is to make pots with this clay. And if you make more pots in kilograms of pots, you will win. The other group is given a computer and CAD software and a design expert and told, we are going to make the most beautiful pot. Whichever makes the most beautiful pot is going to win. Whenever this experiment is repeated, guess who wins and makes the most beautiful pot? It's always the first group. Because it's one thing to design a pot, it's totally another thing to make it. And in the act of making 50 pots, 100 pots, you realize what is the most beautiful pot and you become an art form on how to make it rather than to visualize it. So what ends up happening is that these companies are executing so much and so fast and building those learnings in-house. And that causes these rapid product cycles. So Luckin Coffee, screwing Starbucks. Starbucks share is down from 60% to I don't even know what it is, 6% maybe. Like it's a disaster. And why is that? Is that because Luckin is a better coffee? No, I think I would say it similarly. But they have so much innovation. 1 week they have a Baijiu flavored coffee. 2 weeks later, they have something different. All of these short life cycle. They do a Baijiu flavored thing. They sell $10 million in the first 2 hours. And
wow.
And on they go, right? So this rapid product cycle with instant feedback loop and real-time R&D. So R&D is not something sitting, making a plan for 4 years later. R&D is like, I need 10 products. Here is the consumer feedback. It's coming to you real time. I need this converted into a new product next week. And
so Adi, on this, we've seen brands in India, and I don't know I don't think we were this fast, but सब brand की शुरुआत ना ऐसी होती है. Like you iterate to the answer. But अब क्या हो रहा है ना? Let's go back to the first question I started with. कि अब company बड़ी हो रही है, and I'm being told you have to slow down. You have to bring high quality products because now you're a large brand. You can't afford to screw up, right? Things have to become a process, etc., etc. At the same time, we have to now still, how do we not lose what got us here while trying to...
Again, you have to structure it so that it is the system that does it. So I'll come to this point and I'll bring it back. So if you look at the second point, it's platform native commerce.
Yeah.
So you have so much innovation. Where do you get the ideas from innovation? You get it from the platform that you are closely integrated with. So when I was in China, we set up this whole e-commerce thing, which is, so by the way, the Reckitt China business today, Reckitt in India has started in 1930. Massive business. It used to be, it still is a very successful business. Reckitt China, when I went there in 2008, was a $15 million business. At that point of time, India may have been, I don't even remember, 300 million, 400 million. Today, the Chinese business is much bigger than the Indian business. And not just that, it is growing at multiples faster. Like not 1x faster or 2x faster, more than that. Right? Why is that? Well, the answer is
Arjun. Arjun is the answer.
Arjun is the answer, partially. But the other answer is what Arjun and the team there have enabled. So they have built a business which is sitting on platforms. So for example, when I was there, the Alibaba store was massive. Today, the TikTok store is much bigger than the Alibaba store. They have live streaming there's a 5-story building which is full of rooms, which is 24/7 live streaming, 50 rooms all the time. And
this is in Reckitt. Reckitt is doing live streaming.
Like Reckitt is doing live streaming like you would not believe it's doing live streaming. It is.
Wow.
So I haven't been there, of course, and I would, even if I was, I would not tell you exactly what, but I can tell you this, that you study what these companies are doing and you realize that if you think of TikTok, right? People are thinking it's not a great platform, but TikTok is a platform which compresses your entire, or Reels is a platform which compresses your entire cycle. You can get acquisition, you get people, you can get interest because you can give them something new. You can get direct click to purchase in one platform in 30 seconds. Of course, you're going to iterate on that like crazy and have a different product every 30 minutes and have a different presenter. Someone was telling me that when they do these things, they are down to the level that when they open a bottle, what sound it will make and how much conversion whether it'll open with a plop or a top or a tick, makes a difference in the bloody conversion.
My God.
It is a art form masquerading as science, in the sense that what they've done is you've got pipelines of data and information which is coming back in real time every day to the sales and marketing and also the product teams. for the product iteration to happen and the communication iteration to happen in real time. And
Wow.
you can do these iterations because the cost of the iteration is nothing. Anyway, you putting that out of every 1,000 TikTok videos, 990 of them are going to be useless. So it doesn't matter. So you can try whatever you want.
But tell me this, Adi, there is a growing concern among businesses that everybody's falling slave to the algorithm.
Yes.
Because these algorithms of these platforms, which is either an Instagram or a Google before or a YouTube before, now a TikTok, is essentially going to govern that. And every 6 months you need to change. And Meta is now also reacting to how well TikTok is growing, right? Like Amazon, in my view, has been the most stable algorithm, if I can call it that, because they've set up as a transactional marketplace, and they are also now struggling because US is the bellwether. But apart from that, they are not able to scale anywhere else because all these other markets or top of funnels are now realizing कि हम ही रख लेते हैं customer को, right? Whether it's YouTube, I don't know if you know, YouTube in India has now integrated Shorts, which is the Reels or the TikTok format. You can directly shop on Flipkart or Myntra because people are doing the same affiliate shopping that TikTok does, let's say in China, right?
Yeah.
So the future is that you will want to control behavior through the algorithms and get people to do what you want to. But in some ways, brands then become slave to these algorithms. Right?
Yeah. So
I know it's a very old man thinking way of it. Ki, Arey, nahi, anarth ho jayega type.
So I have a full, thing about this, which is about how AI is going to develop and the role of brands. And we should come back to that. That's a much bigger discussion. But in essence, what I think is going to happen, and I'll divert from China because I'm so interested in this. I'll divert for like 1 minute and come back. But I won't go too deep, right? And we can discuss it some other time. So basically what I think is going to happen is that we are moving into this thing which I am calling entity AI. So what is entity AI? Every brand, every company is actually an entity and will appear and be visible and available in anthropomorphic form, like a human being. So we are not far from a world where we are going to have this conversation and we are actually all virtual avatars on Zoom. And I'm going to say something like, okay, Google, do you think Revant is right? And another chat window will open and a Google that looks like Google, which will be like a person, will pop up and say, I think Revant is right because of whatever this data is. And this Google will be having this conversation in 1 million Zoom meetings and 1 billion phones at the same time in human form, like Shivji Prakat Hue kind of thing. And the same opportunities there for every brand. So if I want to have something about shaving, I should just be able to get into this virtual room and say, hey, Bombay Shaving Company, I have this issue with ingrown hair. What am I going to do with it? And Bombay Shaving Company, who looks a bit like Shantanu, will appear and say, this is what, and these are the 4 products. So until we get, and I think I have frameworks on how brands and companies will get to there, in my opinion. But until we get to that point, we have to iterate through the owners of the platforms where our consumers are. Because as consumer brands, until we can become personal friends with 1 billion consumers and be on their direct dial list as a brand, until that happens, we are at the mercy of the place where these people go to shop. So if they are going to Amazon to shop, you need to be platform native to Amazon. If they go to TikTok to shop, you need to be platform native to TikTok. If TikTok changes the algorithm, you better know about it and change as quickly as possible. And if you don't, you're screwed. Okay? Coming back to China again. So that was the idea about platform native.
आप डरा रहे हो आदि मेरे को बहुत डरा रहे हो मैं सोच रहा हूँ we are at the cutting edge of innovation. My CTO is going to do a presentation to the board because he got some pat on the back from a couple of people saying क्या AI इंटीग्रेशन किया. मैं सोच रहा हूँ भाई कुछ भी नहीं किया हमने तो आप जो बोल रहे हो वो तो बहुत दूर है मुझसे अभी.
नहीं दूर,
but let's get back.
But direction वो है. So then let's come to the third point, which is price performance engineering. So this time when I went to China in November, we sat in a car and this car navigated us across 40 kilometers in China, in Shanghai, with basically no driver, right? Like in the US also. But the difference is, unlike the US Waymo car, which had all of those gizmos on top, this thing has nothing. It's just a normal car. You can buy it. You sit in this thing, it will take a U-turn on a crowded road. It will cross a 7-pointed, 7-way roundabout. It is driving in a road where 50 cyclists come and break a red light and it still is fine. And so I'm in this world and I look at this and I'm a user of Tesla. I bought my first Tesla in 2017. For the last 8 years, I've driven a Tesla. And I'm like, if I had this car, so this car has an AI assistant, right? 7-seater car, by the way, 700-mile range. If you're sitting on the last seat on the left and you say, turn down the temperature, the AI will automatically figure out where you're sitting and turn down the temperature there. It's got massage seats everywhere. It's got a 30-inch TV screen that comes in from the back. Okay. This car, which is priced at a price of, let's call it $30,000. I bought my Tesla in the UK at 52,000 pounds. That same Tesla is available in China at 26,000 pounds and it's getting its butt kicked. So
I started seeing BYD in India also, by the way.
you will see it everywhere. It's going to be,
It's fantastic.
well, let me tell you about the UK. Tesla in the first quarter, also aided by Elon Musk's gymnastics with Trump, has become the number 4 electric car. From a situation 3 years ago where the Model 3 was the best-selling car in the country. It's become the number 3 electric car, number 4. The top 3 are Chinese. In the UK. It's not just that. Go to Singapore. You go to Southeast Asia. All the Japanese car companies are totally wiped off the map. So what's happening is that you have this situation, Luckin Coffee, Starbucks, same thing. Starbucks, you buy a latte for 40 RMB or 50 RMB, like $7. Luckin Coffee, $9.99. So when I used to live in China, the top car companies used to be the Germans. So Volkswagen, biggest car company in China at that time, GM from America, BMW, Mercedes. Volkswagen used to sell 17 million cars in China, 17 million. I mean, just compute that number, right? What happened was, and these were high end. So you would say, I want to use a Volkswagen car because it says something about me. And so you drove a BMW because a BMW said something about you. Today, when I go and I see all these people, all of them have switched from their BMWs to some Chinese car. So I asked them that, my friend, why have you moved to a Chinese car? You know, when I was here, if I was not driving a BMW and because my company was cheap, you know, because it should be also, I was driving this bloody Buick nonsense. And people used to look at me pityingly and say, ye Buick chalata hai. So why are you not driving beer? So they say that, look, 10 years ago, we used to look pityingly at people who were not driving BMW because iski itni bhi auqat nahi hai ki BMW chala le. But now, if we see someone who's driving a BMW, we look pityingly at him. So I said, why? He says, kitna bevkoof hai? How stupid. First of all, he is driving a car that is 20% of the quality of the car that I drive. And second, it is at double the price. So isse zyada bevkoof
the status, Adi? Like India में brands में, like Kunal Shah keeps telling, right, कि you have to sell status. India में अभी भी सारे brand status ही बेच रहे हैं.
तो वहाँ भी status है, पर status में ये India add हो गया है कि मेरा दिमाग भी है.
Correct. It's intellectual status now. Are you smart enough? How smart are you?
Are you smart enough to get 90% quality at 50% price?
Not 90. So 120% quality. In the case of cars, 200% quality. I can tell you, having driven that car, I would throw my Tesla in the dustbin in 2 minutes. Those cars are so much better.
आज भी आदि चिराग एंड शांतनु वो आईफोन करते हैं, मैं तो एंड्रॉइड यूज करता हूँ, तो वो अभी भी थोड़ा सा है यार कि यार आईफोन है.
When is Adi saying कि एंड्रॉइड बढ़िया है?
I have both.
नहीं, मेरे पास भी दोनों है.
At least I remember one stat that
so China में iPhone still remains the one foreign brand that still survives and does okay in the sense that it's by volume it would be like a 15-20% share, but even there the highest end people may still to be 50-50 between iPhone and the Xiaomi or Huawei, but the vast majority of people would see iPhone as aspirational. It is true in China also. So so China has always been a brand conscious market, right? So it's the biggest luxury market in the world. But even in a market like that, there is a flip. And I'll come to beauty in a minute because I'll come to your categories in a second. And you can see this flip starting to happen here. So if you see here, there is this question of price and performance engineering. So getting 120% of the quality for 50% of the price or 60 or 70% of the price is good. And what these companies then do is they tier. So companies will not have one brand, they will have 3 brands and they will cover all the price tiers. And the top end will not be 120% better, it will be 3 times better quality wise.
Wow.
But one view I've seen
So,
little
Adi, you are
different, Adi, in
saying
this
that-
case. Sorry, Chirag, is so my team recently had gone to China for a nutraceutical, because that's our business, right? We are largely in wellness supplements, nutraceuticals. And we are the only fiber-based gummy in the world, not just India, in the world, right? And we are very proud of that. And I told you, देखो जाके सब बोल रहे हैं China में better है तो शायद देखो करके. We were shocked to know that the best-selling brands in the US all procure from China. And the manufacturer told us कि, जैसे for example, creatine is a big supplement in the US, now getting bigger in India as well. And we are the only ones who have sold 1.5 gram creatine in a gummy. And people are like, यार डोजेज कम है, मैं अपनी टीम के बजा रहा हूँ कि भाई 5 ग्राम क्रिएटिन लेना है लोगों को, भरो आप क्रिएटिन. एंड दे आर लाइक साइंटिफिकली पॉसिबल ही नहीं है, 1 का 1.5 करने में हमें बैंड बच गई है. ऐसे नहीं, चाइना जाके देखो करके क्या हो रहा है. I have written confirmation that the creatine gummies selling in the US that are manufactured in China don't have creatine. So that fake thing still exists, at least in some things where there's no way to test. Like, see, car quality you can experience. There's nothing you can experience in a supplement जो तुम 3 साल हो गया तुम्हें कुछ फर्क नहीं पड़ रहा है.
You're totally right. So China में हमेशा there have been 2 markets and both these markets are the biggest in the world. So the first market is a very cheap market and the second market is a very premium market. And these 2 markets coexist. So in China, you can buy a Hermes bag from the store and come back and outside you'll find a fake which is 90% of the quality and 20% of the price in the doorstep of that store. And it is your choice which one you want to buy. And whichever you buy, whatever you pay for, you will get that quality. But so just think about the supply chain margins here, right? So one of the experiments I do quite often when people ask me this question is I open 2 apps. One is the UK Amazon app and the second is the Alibaba app. So, and I look for something, for example, sheepskin rug. So if you look in the UK, 15 to 25 pounds, you will find a good sheepskin rug. Then you open Alibaba and the same thing, exactly the same picture, you will find between 0.5 and $1 and MOQ of 20 pieces. So, of course, there are billionaires or millionaires who've been created in Europe, but just doing this drop shipping model. But what happens is that the Chinese factory price in general is 10%. So is Lululemon. So when this Trump thing happened, the Lululemon factories came out and said, this is the price we sell to you, Lululemon. The leggings that they sell for $80, these people sell for $2. So the point is कि वो $2 पे अगर तुम 30% tariff लगा भी लो तो $2.5 ही होता है. वो margin तो कहीं और बन रहा है.
Yeah.
Right? So if you are buying from China, you can always find both qualities. And what point I'm making is even the best quality product in China equivalent to the US, the same product will be at 1/3 of the price because the supply chain is so strong and the people cost is so low and the robotic use in those factories. I mean, I've seen a factory which is the size of a football field with 500 robots with one person. There's this saying, no, in the factory of the future, there are 2 people, a man and a dog. Why is the man there? To feed the dog. Why is the dog there? To prevent the man from touching the machine. Anyway.
Well, another amazing thing about China, in fact, my team is there right now, is every time we go there, like one is of course their high-tech ability to like just churn stuff and innovate is amazing, but even their emotional quotient and people orientation is insane. So there will be a huge board outside any factory, any vendor factory, which will say, welcome Shantanu, welcome Adi, welcome Revant. Then they'll serve you chocolates. The wrappers will have Bombay Shaving Company branding on it. They'll all be wearing Bombay Shaving Company. But it is insane how much they innovate on even the playbook every year. कुछ ना कुछ नया करते हैं वो
Look, I know a lot of people from the UK, for example, who sold. So let me tell you 2 stories. One story was when I was in China, we used to we have a brand called Beat, or Reckitt had a brand called Beat. We used to source it from France, and then Reckitt had a factory in Baddi in India, And that factory basically was getting better gross margin. So we said, let's source from there. The first year we sourced it, it was a disaster. It all got rejected. Why? Because the best quality in India, and of course with quality tested and all that, was not acceptable because वो थोड़ा सा printing टेढ़ा है. China has an AQI level of 1 in 10,000. Reckitt AQI level was 1 in 100. Acceptable quality, right? So then what happened? The next year we figured that it is much better to still source from India because we still didn't have the factory in China. But what we did was we imported the thing from India. We threw away every carton. We reprinted all the cartons in China, which then were the good quality. And for 3 years, we did this all the time where we imported the crap from India, we fixed it and we sold it in China. And we still made more money than we would have made. And then eventually there was a factory that was created in China. I know people who in the UK who source wipes and things like that from China and from India. And the quality difference is so dramatic, and the professionalism difference, because in China, they know the rules, they know the regulation. They've basically done it for 1,000 people before. They know how to ship it so it gets to you on time. In India, we are still in the learning curve in many of these things, right? And it'll improve. So India is like China was 15 years ago in quality. China was also like this. There's nothing, culturally about it. But it's just that we'll get better. So those are the things to learn from China.
Oh, this is amazing, yeah. Adi, I think while we'll continue, I think we need at least 5 to 10 episodes with you for sure.
We can do one on this and one on AI. So actually AI is the more interesting one. There is much more interesting things there.
आपने पॉडकास्ट के एंड पे ऑडियंस को बड़ा हुक दे दिया. AI वाला तो और इंटरेस्टिंग होगा. लोग बोलेंगे भाई अब अगला वाला कब है, कब आदि कब फिर आएगा करके. But let's quickly go through this.
So you made a point about local things in China and local things in India, and there's something that we can learn. And the answer is absolutely yes. So it's not just about made in China, though there is a bit of that. It is made for China. So the insight here is that Chinese people are different from American people, and they have different needs, right? So how are you going to basically make it, which is in ways that work with us culturally, but also work with us physically? Indian hair is different from, American hair. So should the razor not be subtly different? And I know that Shantanu keeps telling me about how it is subtly different or it should be subtly different, right? And there are all these examples where we know now there is skincare with traditional Chinese medicine. The number one brand in toothpaste in China is Yunnan Baiyao, which is basically a Chinese traditional medicine brand, which basically made a big, actually was a Chinese traditional medicine company originally. And they basically said, we make toothpaste that helps with gum bleeding. And that's basically beaten all of the Colgates and Crests and everybody else in China, number one. So there are, and then there are brands like Li Ning. So Li Ning is now very close to Nike in size in China. Li Ning was an athlete in China, and he started his own brand. So there is a Chinese way to do it. And I think more and more as we mature in India, there will be an Indian way to look at a category or look at a brand or look at the world. And those brands can actually be very premium as well.
I really hope so, but Adi, because if I see what is happening in Ayurveda and the allopathy doctors chadofying, like I'm very happy to see that the largest skincare brand is something that embraces Chinese medicine, and they don't, like somewhere, it's becoming a little popular in India to shit on our traditional 5,000-year-old wisdom. Like कुछ लोग nationalist जा रहे हैं कि और let's adopt, कि our Ayurveda or herbal has always been like the mainstay of how we have evolved as a community, and we should go back to our roots.
But इसमें एक twist है. So China में भी ऐसे ही होता था that nobody cared about Chinese traditional medicine. I mean, they did, but more as a medicine. But what has happened is there is a fusion. So there is a Western way of doing science, Western way of bringing out the ingredient, of proving the claims, of showing demos, of clean labeling, of making it look aspirational, of making it look technical. So when you do that, but it is then powered by a herbal or natural ingredient, it becomes really powerful. And it's also Chinese. But if you're thinking of, so if you look at traditional Chinese medicine, you go to a TCM hospital, it's like a Western hospital in terms of all the diagnostics. It's not कि वो तुम्हारे forehead को देख रहे हैं, तुम्हारी जुबान को देख रहे हैं. They are doing all of the same CT scans that the Western hospitals will do. So I think the trick here is to take extremely good design, extremely good consumer insight, science behind it, clean it up, and then present it back as something that is powered by your cultural heritage, but is relevant for today. Okay, the next one.
I love this always on engagement. My team hates when I actually tell them this. Ki yaar, like I actually believe India is now ready for live commerce. Like Instagram stories have already started live commerce, and I keep telling my team why not do it, and they're like, Revant, 4 ऑर्डर आते हैं उसके और हम करते हैं दिन में 30,000 ऑर्डर, तो लाइक ये मतलब लाइक आज 4 है, कल 40 हो जाएंगे, फिर 400 हो जाएंगे. बट like this is the future. I can see it already in India also. Like there is no reason why a broadcast channel won't end up being a sales channel or a live stream. Like बीच में शुरू हुआ था ना, Shantanu, if you remember, Instagram live used to happen, but then they faded away. But I don't see a reason why. I know the platforms are not very trending on that, but considering India doesn't have TikTok, there is no reason why Instagram. Yeah,
Facebook पे हुआ ज़्यादा.
So maybe Shantanu,
India
you guys, if you're interested, and you should be, want to do a live masterclass on this with Arjun.
We have Arjun coming up, right, Shantanu?
I think on 20, I think 3 episodes down.
But then we should ask him to cover this.
So he'd be really, really expert, because his business is the crown jewel. So if you think of every multinational in China, they're all suffering, right? P&G, Unilever, everybody, Tesla, BMW, everyone is declining. But there is one multinational that is not declining, that is growing leaps and bounds. That is powered by all of these principles.
ये आदि को लेट्स आस्क अर्जुन को, अब अभी बोल दो कि जो अप्रूवल लेना है एनडीए साइन कर लेना है, बट थोड़ा ओपन रहो यार इसके बारे में. दिस इज व्हाट वी रियली क्रेव, राइट? कि यार व्हेन लाइक आवर जॉब्स लार्जली आदि इज नाउ बिकमिंग predicting the future and learning how to prepare for it or get our teams prepared for it in some way. And that's why largely we do this. So very helpful.
And in the past, we were online or offline. So like I've been very guilty of this, which is there's an offline business and I'm like, mera growth online se aayega, so I will focus more on online. In China, and everywhere it's flipping. In China, it's totally flipped. So it doesn't matter online, offline, whether you are in a village, town, city, what platform, TikTok, Pinduoduo, whatever, the brand is going to provide you an experience and be available to you everywhere. So there is comprehensive channel coverage on every channel. It's a multi-channel business. Each channel has to be managed differently. And just because you are a great brand, if a new channel comes up, there is no reason not to be on that, because some of your consumers will be there and they will not find you. And they're not going to leave that channel and come to you searching for your brand. Right? So different strategy for each channel. And there are 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 channels. There is more channel complexity coming in your lives and we have to deal with it. Embedded AI and data infrastructure. So this idea about the learning curve growing very fast and driving the S-curve of the business through that experimentation, etc., can only be driven if every experiment is captured with data, learning captured, and the new experiment is designed and the learning of that is captured. The faster you can run the cycle time of doing that, the faster your business will grow. And in China, which is so data rich, so just to illustrate what I'm talking about. So when we started direct to consumer sites in China, in whatever it was, 2009 or whatever, 16 years ago, there were 4 KPIs that we used to track, which is unique views, people seeing your platform, multiplied by per conversion rate, multiplied by basket size, multiplied by repeat rate. Okay, so this is a very simple formula, and actually there's another workflow another Substack thing I've written on this framework. It's a critical framework because if you get this framework right, that defines the structure of your sales and marketing team, and each of these people works on linear improvement, but the business goes up in an exponential way because these are multiplicative. So matlab ye hai ki if you have 100 people coming to your store, 10% of them convert. So that's 10 people. Let's say they buy 100 rupees. So that's 1,000 rupees. And they come 10 times a year. So that's 10,000 rupees sales. Now improve each of these by 20% only. So it's a linear improvement. You can give your team the target. 12 people come, 12% conversion. 1,200 people come, 12%. So basically that immediately becomes 120. multiplied by conversion जो 10% था 12 हो गया, multiply that by 12 and then multiply that by 12 again. Suddenly for a 20% increase in each KPI, you have a business that grows up by 50 or 60%. To make your business 10 times, if you have an 80% increase in each KPI, your business grows up 10 times. So you can set up a team over a period of 10 years to improve a KPI by 80% over 10 years. And if you do that for 4 KPIs, which are multiplicative, your business is 10 times. So each team is working like this, but the business goes like that. So I've done all the mathematics. It's there in a framework, and it's called what I call the hypergrowth framework. So we've been doing this in China since 2009. For each of those websites, over the last 25 years, every single day, so I don't have access anymore, but Arjun can maybe show it to you or maybe not. There is a daily report that comes with, today for Durex or Dettol, 10,000 people came to the store, 7% converted, average basket size 20 rupees or 20 RMB multiplied by whatever. And this then translated into a million RMB of sale. And the KPI was, when we started, we used to have 0.3, 0.4% conversion. Today, the conversion rates are in the 15 to 20% of traffic is converting. And that is driven through continuous experimentations every day over 20 years. And that business, that's the reason why that business is whatever it is in the region of 1.3, 1.5, whatever $1 billion plus, with 80% from e-commerce.
Outstanding. I'm already excited for having Arjun in. But this is another interesting thing. You're saying across the pyramid, they have been able to make money.
Yeah.
And
So
we keep debating this, that in India, it's very hard to make money at the bottom of the pyramid.
They have a mass market brand called Anta, a premium tier called Fila, and a luxury brand called Descente. Now, piche, the supply chain is the same. The strength of the partnerships, the ecosystem is the same. So basically they, and American companies also have done this. So in the past, P&G, Unilever also do Bold. And so you can tier your brands, right? And because you're doing so much experimentation, each of these brands stands on its own. And what may happen is, from a profit pool point of view, that pyramid may be reversed. And you'll also have a system where people come in at the mass market and you upgrade them to the premium tiers. And then where it is useful, bring in nationalist power. So in Huawei was hit by these American sanctions. When that happened, they had to stop. But when they came back on day one, they already had 20% share.
Wow.
So there's a new...
They played that up. That because,
Yeah.
US doesn't want from us, let's buy in China.
Yeah, and our product is anyway better than the iPhone, and it's totally different. So try. So I'll give you another example. The Xiaomi, the new car that they've launched, Y whatever, the pre-orders in one day is 40 billion pounds.
Wow. Pre-order and billion. Okay, may not be 40, maybe 20. We can recheck the number just for correctness, but it is in the Some
billion.
crazy number.
It is a number which is more than the revenue of the biggest company in India, probably.
आप आदि बहुत आइडिया दे रहे हो. I can already see a very cool razor coming out जिसमें हैंडल पे लिखा है मी मराठी और मराठी माणूस from Shantanu. And entire Maharashtra is going, or at least Bombay is going away.
Jai Maharashtra.
Like, Pune, Bombay is like Jai Maharashtra. Jai Maharashtra करके डाल दे एक razor Shantanu तो. High time.
This is just a final summary. Basically, it's telling you your 4 P's होते थे ना, उसको तुम 5 P's कर दो. So basically product,
Pace add कर दिया.
platform, price, positioning and pace.
Pace is, I think, the hardest at scale. It's amazing that a scaled up company like a Didi or a PDD.
I think has to be with technology that you design what he's saying. Now, system design has to be in such a way that you are like, that's probably one of the cultural things which you build.
Yes, and this will
Do you
take
have
us
any framework on that?
Yes, we will come back to this. This will take us nicely into the AI discussion. I'll tell you why. Because one of my frameworks in AI is something which I call the swarm framework, and Chirag will understand this because the business that he's built is that kind of business. So the idea here is that in life there are agents. So what is an agent? An agent is anything that replicates itself. So money is an agent. If I put dollars into a bank account, there'll be baby dollars the next day. Similarly, people are agents. So if you leave people and give them a task, they can recruit more people. You can have content is also an agent. So it's an agent is something that can basically inspire others to create more content and scale. Bots are agents. AIs are agents. So what you can do to scale a business, you need to scale agents that are actually getting work done. So in the past, a lot of the agents that were scaled were slow scale things like people. But in the future, the moment you have agents which are built on AIs, bots, content, money, these are things that can live almost like SaaS things in the crevices of your business and keep scaling themselves. And then the question is, how do you set these up in series or in parallel, in various circuits almost, to automatically, and with the right supervision mechanism, whatever, to automatically scale. And what they do is they scale not just the business, but they scale the information. So when you get the information back, you can then have a backend that actually uses that information to actually create a virtuous kind of flywheel. So when so again, I have a framework which is called the swarming framework. Don't build a company, build a swarm. So if you think of someone like Telegram, so Telegram has whatever number, 50 employees, but 1 billion users. How do you get 1 billion users with 50 employees? By automating all of these things and using agents. So the question, and this is the big opportunity also in front of India. People ask me about UK. Yeah? UK is this country where aging population, there are not enough people working. But I'm like, okay, there are 60, 70 million people in the UK, 300 and some million in the US. But what if the UK had 60 million people and 500 million bots? Then what productivity could you generate out of that?
Got it.
Fascinating.
Outstanding.
Okay, I'm already getting an itch to go to the next room and give my people ki और speed चाहिए.
Actually, दिक्कत
Speed के लिए system. Don't beat people up. Be kind to people.
हाँ, ये आदि यही
Yeah,
मेरे
system,
को भी टीम से
exactly.
मिलता है. जब भी कुछ नया बोलता हूँ ना, आके बोलता है यार ये पक्का कुछ पॉडकास्ट रिकॉर्डिंग करके आए करके.
And we have this advantage of like before it gets released, हम 3 दिन पहले जाके बोलना शुरू कर देते हैं.
So AI पे there are
No, but this is
two lenses to discuss whenever we have a conversation, and both are very interesting. So I've spent a few years now trying to become the best user of AI that I can be. So, and I love to do this for companies, and I do this again and again, and I knock people's socks off totally because they cannot, nobody believes what you can do with AI, and I can actually show you guys to personally use AI, what it means. People think they use AI, but they don't. They're using really the top level. So that's one. And the second thing we can have a discussion, which is very interesting, of course, is also what will change in the world. One of the things I'm doing is I've written all these frameworks around entity AI, and I'm writing actually a disruption manifesto for 25 industries, one by one. So I just finished education yesterday. So we can go into, that's too much. We won't go into that kind of detail, but we can have a discussion about how we should think about AI from a societal perspective, how it's going to mean for India. There are some very interesting AI companies coming out of India. I can give you demos of Indian tools that you don't know exist. But for example, Shantanu, I can show you demos of tools that can do market research or creative development for you. And I'm not talking about creating an ad, but developing the campaign conceptually. I can show you an AI tool that comes from India where you just plug in your Amazon page and it's going to tell you exactly what to change to have a 20% conversion increase.
wow.
Made in India. And just for entertainment, it's a totally different topic, and I don't know whether let me show you something I'd asked Shantanu for. This is just a taster preview, right? So I'm going to show you.
मैंने बोला तो 2 साल में हम 20 करोड़ पर बनती कंपनी बन जाएगी अप्रैल 2018.
Okay, so this is something which is called Venture GPT.
Okay.
And what I'm going to do is I'm taking Shantanu's pitch deck.
Yeah. Of 2016.
For the viewers, this is a 9-year-old deck, so please forgive anything that comes out as output from Adi's.
No, this is for entertainment.
Roast this deck. You've trained it well, huh? Bombay Shaving Company, team slide roast, consultants as consultants assemble. The founding team reads like a McKinsey alumni party with group and VIP pass. 6 people, 5 MBAs, 0 clear operator FMCG. Own the
A
men's
team of
grooming and
thinkers, but who's doing?
who's the men use what's in the washroom. The real insight is that women buy 60-70% of men's grooming products. Your entire strategy hinges on bypassing the primary buyer. That's either genius or suicidal. Trying to educate men and changing buying behavior and build a brand. Triple threat or triple trap? Oh God. Expensive in the
So might need to shave the pricing logic too.
This तो I called out Shantanu. जब तेरा वो महारथी रेजर था वो you are pricing like Apple and selling like a D2C startup. क्या? Oh God. This is too good,
Final
yeah.
roast line.
Now
This
I
deck is there,
understand how
like
VCs
their-
are enjoying their life, Adi.
Give
They have
me
all got this
10
roast.
Tough questions to ask the founder. And what's a good, bad, good start, red flag answer?
Wow.
Tight and tough. Okay. What customer behavior insights? Good answer. We learned. Red flag. It looks premium and
Adi,
no one else is doing it.
Was there a typo? Was that toit a typo or is toit actually tough and tight?
No type.
It caught it
In your
properly.
prompt?
Tight and tough. उसने पकड़ लिया
In
ऐसे
your
ही.
prompt?
Tight. Tight question.
Does it mean something or was it an actual typo?
No. It was a typo.
Why is CAC increasing your fast? What is plan? CAC is under our projection, so it's all fine. It will go down as we scale. Red flag. I agree. But this is the standard answer all of us give. कि अरे over time कम हो जाएगा. आज ही मैंने my ex chief of staff Shantanu, you remember Marmik? He put out he's at Bloom now, right? He put out an article saying CAC goes up and then comes down over time, and तो मेरे को वही याद आया. सब वही answer देते हैं.
So anyway, just to show you an example, and you can use this to clean up the pitch deck. You can you can create an amazing pitch deck in very quickly using tools like
Wow.
this. So just
I can't wait for next week. Can't wait.
Yeah, can't wait for the next one. Yeah, really, really helpful, Adi. I think we had a lot of fun.
Yeah, we pride ourselves on using AI well. Like we do a lot of our briefing, outputs, people for structures, etc. on AI. Like we have some really good super users, but I think this is going to be a lot of fun. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Like, I don't know if you watched our episode on wealth game versus status game. We keep thinking about how to align employees who will be here for wealth creation versus status. And large companies become more about status, designation, etc. Right? So in that journey, as you were saying, that हमें लग रहा है कि हम बड़े हैं और हमारे एक कुछ प्रॉब्लम्स हैं जो हमें सॉल्व करने हैं. But as a founder and a CEO, maybe we are a little focused there. But as you're saying that the market doesn't know that, and neither do the employees think like that. So would love to hear a little bit more thought on this.
Okay, so that's a great question, because eventually, life is a continuum. You start off as a founder and then eventually you build a business. But I think the important thing is to separate the founder from the business. So a business happens to be started by a founder. And then if the business creates products or services that are actually amazing and they gets consumer love, then it takes on a life of its own. It's a legal entity of its own also. So it's different from the founder, and it is something that can live for 100 years. So in a sense, a founder is almost like a parent of a business, right? So a founder or a founding team is like mommy and papa. So when you have a baby, you behave in a very different way from when the baby is in school, when the baby is growing up, when the baby gets its first job. Now it's not a baby anymore. And then eventually the baby goes off and becomes, a real person in the real world. And then they have children of their own and the company keeps growing. So all of us who worked with large companies actually all stand on the shoulders of giants. And we forget the founders who came before us. Every large company today is a founder-created and founder-led company. And the only variable that has changed is longitudinal variable of time. So if your product and service is compelling enough, the company will create its own future. Now, your job is to think of the company as an entity that is going to have this brilliant future. This entity has a purpose. This thing exists to provide some service or some benefit or do something for consumers, but also make money for shareholders, and there are multiple stakeholders. So how do you enable it to do that best? And to begin with, you have to nurture it. You have to nurture it with your time, your attention, your creativity. And then as you go forward, you realize that you still have that, but at a very senior strategic level. But you need to have a company that mostly runs itself. It's got systems, processes. And very often that's how you set the culture is very linked to how you set up the processes in a company and how you set up the structure of a company. Eventually, culture mimics structure, process, and reward. So if you do your job in setting up all of those things right, the company will be kind of self-sustaining. At some point of time, the company will continue to live on and you will die. And when that happens, assuming that you stay with the company, right, or you will leave, and at that point of time, there will be other people who take it up, and then the question becomes how you pass the baton to the next generation. So it's a very long-term thing. If you think about it from a very short-term perspective, you can say things like in the beginning, it's a bit more art. And then as you go a bit forward, it's a bit more science. And as a founder, if you are going to span that 0 to 1 journey, but also the 1 to 10 journey, and then the 10 to 100 journey, you have to change yourself. You have to change what drives you. You have to also change who you surround yourself with. And also you have to have a system where the structure and the system works for you rather than you working for the system and structure, because otherwise you will kill yourself as a founder. If you apply the same, you guys are, relatively recent founders of potentially very big global businesses eventually. If you maintain the same level of levers of control that you have today and your same personal passion and your personal involvement, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, there are not enough hours in the day. You can't scale yourself that much. So you have to find scaling agents that scale the company.
First place where I think the wealth game should be differentiated from the status game is at the founder level, right? Like you have an operating responsibility, and part of that scaling up, I love what you said, right? There's a limited amount of time that hum kitna bhi passionate ho, we can't be everywhere. So we need to professionalize, set processes, get the right people, and then get the right culture, because what gets valued by the CEO or what the top management of what the CEO really indicates that is important to him or her or to the company is where the behavior and the culture will start growing, right? But this is all easier said than done, and we have read about this. I'm sorry, because I know you've seen this across 35 years, but our mind sort of boggles कि यार आज warehouse फट रहा है और आप ये strategic बात कर रहे हो, like दोनों को reconcile करना, because we are in the thick of things, is something that I'm sure after 10 years we'll reflect back and say, yeah, this was the pivotal moment. But how do you stay self-aware in while you are in the thick of things is something that I think at least I grapple with a lot.
So I think all of us grapple with it, right? And I'm always reminded on this by something my dad used to tell me. He used to say कि you have to be like the bird on the tree. चिड़िया branch पे बैठी है. जब वो branch पे बैठी है तो उसको पूरा bird's eye view है. उसको सब कुछ दिख रहा है. And you can basically figure out what the relationship between things are, where the food is, where the danger is, and you can have a strategic view. फिर उसी चिड़िया को खाना मिल जाता है. तो वो चिड़िया उड़ के, it's down on the ground and it's pecking at the stuff, at the grain on the ground. Now you have tunnel vision, you are focused on the grain on the ground, that is the task that you're doing. And you are in execution mode. So you have to have self-awareness. So first of all, you have to have the ability to do both. You have to be able to zoom in and zoom out. You have to have a telescope, but remember that when you flip the telescope, it becomes a microscope. And any good manager or any good leader has to know when to use the telescope and when to use the microscope and when to use the wide angle and when to use the zoom. And that's a very defining thing, because if you're standing on the ground and you're trying to zoom far away, it's not really going to help you. So you should always try and be aware of where you are and what you are doing. And this links back eventually to prioritization. देखो दिन में, whether you are Shantanu or me or Chirag, Revant or Donald Trump, doesn't matter. You only have 24 hours in a day. If you take out eating, sleeping, golfing, whatever, and you have like 12 hours a a day or 10 hours a day or whatever number of hours a day that you're going to work. So you run a business which is, I don't know what, like 300, 400 crores, maybe 1,000 crores. Tomorrow you're running a business that's 20,000 crores. It's not that you're going to get more hours in the day. It's not that, you're Donald Trump or Barack Obama. You run such a complex thing, but you don't have more hours in the day. The only thing that you can control is not the hours. The only truly democratic thing in the world is hours. The only thing you can control is your priority, right? So the ability to say कि मेरा priority ये है, अभी मुझे I'm going to look widely and formulate my strategy. And some other time, I know my strategy, I'm going to be in execution mode, but I know I'm in execution mode. And if I have a problem, I can step back and get into strategic mode. And having that self-awareness, almost like that bird, is, I think, what every senior leader or manager goes through. And getting this balance right is so important. There's this very famous thing about this Japanese Aikido master, right? So basically, this guy was never out of balance. So once, like 10 people attacked him and he threw all of them. And somebody asked him, how do you do this? How do you always stay in balance? He says, it's not that I'm not in balance. I'm always in balance. I'm actually out of balance, but I come back into balance very fast.
Excellent analogy.
Maybe Adi, what you are saying that law of physics or chemistry apply when you're scaling up and it becomes a lot more art in 0 to 1. Maybe we view it a little bit differently. We find that at least in 0 to 1 stages, we know a little bit of playbooks that how does this work? Speed matters more than quality. And let's ship fast, even if it is broken. Let's get to few merchants, and get the feedback going. Whatever I think you were saying, I was at least finding कि यार ये judgment banana in terms of when to zoom out, when to zoom in, when to focus on this. That looks more art to me, clearly. कि यार यही नहीं समझ में आ रहा कि we keep worrying what Revant is saying, what we keep worrying, okay, ये solve कर रहे हैं, but ये तो नहीं miss हो गया. Or if you're doing this, I would have done a new product at that point in time. So, that keeps straggling. Or, we've got someone new in the team. Will they deliver? How do I make that guy successful? Am I putting in the right things? So we are in that stage where, let's say, the kid is growing up and he has many options in life and he's figuring out, यार मैं golfer बन जाता. Okay, आज Wimbledon चल रहा है तो okay, I could have been a next Roger Federer also. We are going through those kind of challenges.
You're right. You can call that art also. But in a sense, what I mean by art is something that is opinion driven. And as a founder, you're making these quick opinions to say, okay, let's ship fast, let's do this test, let's do that test. And you do it based on available information very quickly. And essentially, you're doing lots of experiments, the cost of each very quickly. And we'll come back to pace as a very important thing when we talk also about China. So you do these experiments very quickly, and then you come in, you are able to pivot very quickly. But the reason you can do that is the cost of each experiment is very small, and therefore you can do many experiments. And even if you fail, it doesn't matter so much. So in a sense, it looks scientific, but it is art in the sense that eventually it's judgment. There are 3 things that are equally likely, and you are like, let me test these 3 quickly, or ye wala acha hai. That choice ki kya karna is art in a sense, in my view. But when you're a very large company and you're going to do something which is going to, you're creating a new piece of content, or you're doing something that needs to deliver $30 million uplift in the next 6 months, otherwise you're not going to meet your plan. That's a very different thing. Then you may actually spend, a month to get that right. Something that I would have done, like I've gone full circle, right? So I started out like in a small company that was relatively small. Reckitt India was quite small that time. When I joined, it was 120 crores, right? And it was like a 120 crore startup in India. And eventually, when I left the company, at that point, I was running a business at some points, which was like 10, 12, 14 billion, 30,000 people in my team. And then from there, I've come to a situation where I have between 6 and 12 people in my team, depending on the time. And it is totally, remote working, and it is totally driven by technology tools, how you work. So in this whole kind of flip, you can see that because the cost of a decision or cost of a judgment is totally different based on context, the same person ends up doing a very different value judgment on how you spend your time. And then eventually it's about, as a founder, whether you enjoy the art or the science. So somehow the art can also be in deciding which science to deploy, right? So if you, and depending on who you are. So in my case, I figured that I'll enjoy much more this more gut feel kind of thing. I work faster. So which is one of the reasons that I decided to retire from a large company and, start a small company, because this is more fun and I'm in the lucky position of doing whatever the hell I want. मुझे कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता. So, but you guys are in the other thing where you're starting from where I'm trying to, my aspiration, and you're trying to get to where I was. So it's almost like a circular thing, right?
How did you, as an employee who was seeing that growth happen, pivot your thinking, if I can call it that, कि यार अब हमें ऐसे सोचना चाहिए कि, or was it just high ownership agency, like you were always a founder at heart, even though you were working for a large company? Was it more intrinsics, or is there a professional way to set the functional expectations for a high growth company management team? Is it possible, or people have to figure it out themselves?
It's a great question, and I'm totally the wrong person to answer it from a personal experience. The reason is that I'm this crazy person who always was in a large company and was very bored with what was happening. So I was always looking for a more fun thing to do. And then that fun thing ended up being the high growth thing that transformed the business. And that then became, a few years later, the core of the business. And that happened again and again. And because of that, that's the reason why I grew relatively fast. But your answer is the answer you're looking for. Actually, I have that answer. And that answer is from somebody else's experience. So, and it goes back to my old company, Reckitt. And I've written I write these things which I call frameworks, which are about, how you can think about these kinds of things in repeatable ways. So, when Reckitt and Coleman and Benckiser was formed, and it became Reckitt Benckiser, right? There was a merger. We had a CEO called Bart Becht, and he had a leadership team. So these guys created a masterclass in how you structure a company in a way, like I said before, where structure defines exactly the culture and exactly defines the growth momentum, and it creates a culture of entrepreneurship and ownership. And this is something that is scientific and, in my opinion, totally repeatable. So let me just tell you like a few of those principles. So the first principle that they used was that you always need creative conflict. So, and constructive conflict. So what that means is that you structure your organization in a way where for everything there is somebody who's the clear owner, and there is somebody else who has an opinion. So in this case, it was a global business. The country had clear ownership of the P&L, but the brand equity rights was owned by the global category director. So what will happen is that the country will propose this is what we are doing, or do whatever they are doing, and this global category director can have a point of view and will support. And if the point of view clashes, then there is a forum that escalates this decision up one step to the regional head, up 2 steps the next day or next week to the president. And if nothing happens, then in a week, any decision so in a country like India or Chile, if there was some disagreement with category and country, it would get escalated to the CEO within a week, and then there would be a decision. So what creative conflict allows you to do, number one, is for the organization to surface issues rather than hide issues. The second thing that they did was everybody had a set of metrics which everyone understood. So in the case of Reckitt, the metrics were very simple: net revenue growth, profit growth, and negative net working capital. And the question was how negative, right? That's the only thing. Everybody had individual targets which they could control for this. These individual targets tied up to something very important, which is incentivization. So in a company, what you incentivize is what you get. If you want something, you incentivize it. If you don't incentivize it, you're not going to get it. You can put all the posters on the walls, but nothing will happen. So on incentivization, the way it worked in Reckitt was a genius system for that time. So essentially what the way they designed the system was, let's say that you join at a particular level, industry salary is 100, you get 75 is your base salary of industry. So you're slightly underpaid relative to your peers. right? Somebody else is in Unilever, they're making $100,000, you will make $75,000. Then what they say is, if you achieve your target on those 3 KPIs, you will get a target bonus, which is, let us call it 40% of your base salary. So 40% of 75 gets you to the industry average. So far, so good. So if you're an average performer, you make the same as industry. Now, if you are a standout performer, so let's say your target is to grow at 20%, and now you're given a stretch target of 50%. You achieve that 50%, you get a multiplier on that 40% bonus. That multiplier could be up to 3.57 times. Why 3.57? Because 3.57 multiplied by 40% means you can make 150% of your base salary. Simple. So if my salary is 75,000, I can make 200,000. But it'll only happen if I have kick-ass results, right? And now what happens is that at the end of the year, people, or end of 3 years, people who have consistently not made their bonus actually are earning a bit less than everywhere else. And anybody from Unilever or P&G can recruit these people, and they will likely leave, and that's totally cool. So it self-selects people out. But the good performers in Reckitt, nobody could ever recruit them, ever. If you recruited someone from Reckitt who's a good performer, they came at a 50% pay cut and they chose to come. But you could structurally not recruit them, right? So that structurally keeps the talent in the company, right? So that's the second thing. The third thing the company did was it built almost like a family of people who came in and competed with each other, but who also were put in positions of personal difficulty. So every other company will take you and put you in a different country. So you're from India, they'll say your home country is India, and I've put you in the Philippines, and eventually you will come back to India. Your salary is still in India, benchmark to India, whatever, right? That's how multinationals work. In Reckitt, what will happen is at some point you reach a particular level, and then you're a global, your career is global. So you're taken and specifically put into Indonesia, and then you're put into China, and then you're put into Europe, and you basically start from scratch. You have to learn the local language as much as you can. You have to, see a very different world. And then these people are shuffled between sales and marketing, and there is a career path that takes them through all of this. And this is defined and held by the CEO of the company, right? So these 200, 300, 400 people who run a massive company like that, each of those people is a special individual person who the CEO knows, and they are moving through this kind of mesh. And what ends up happening is that you create people with tremendous levels of responsibility, with tremendous levels of knowledge, but most importantly, because you've maximized serendipity, you've given people experiences in things they are uncomfortable in personally and physically, they learn much more. So just to illustrate what I mean, when you take a flight today, you don't learn anything new. You're probably on your phone. But the first time you took a flight, your eyes were really open. You could see, you wanted to know how to get through this barrier. You wanted to know who is stamping your passport. The learning that you had the first time was much more than the learning you have the 25th time. So the point is, how can we make you have different experiences, like taking a flight, but then doing something else, but then doing something else in a structured way related to the business, so that your brain is always in learning mode rather than I know it all mode. And then when you get senior enough, then you put in with people who have the opposite experience, so that, and then you're made to have constructive conflict with those people, right? So that way you're forced to see other points of view. So you can actually set up an organization, and there are these, I can share the thing with you, the framework. I just gave you 2 or 3. So there are these 8 or 9 principles that you can use to set up a business, which then create a culture which is entrepreneurial, which has ownership, which basically people are well remunerated. If they do well, it basically makes sure that you actually create something that feels very cohesive. And it's not just in Reckitt. Many companies have done things like this. And there are, there are playbooks that you can roll out, and you will, if you roll that playbook out, you will get that culture. So an ex-Reckitt person, I won't name the company, and person I know has gone and implemented this in another large company. And I went and actually, did some work or helped that company with something, and I could see exactly the same culture. And Interestingly, that company globally is growing at 4%. This person manages, let's call it, a quarter of the world, and his business is growing at 16%.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Outstanding. Please do share those list of frameworks with us. I think, if nothing else, this is a big takeaway that I'm going to sort of do and, go through those and see. I mean, every time we do a podcast, by the way, my HR hates it because I come with 3 new ideas saying, yaar, ye karte hain, karke.
And
But
for
I think
sure,
one of
I've
the
been
most
reading your
interesting-
blog. The most recent one I had shared with my team was the promotion framework you had put out. That how to appraisal season was going on. I had sent it to my team that this is how you need to think. I was asking related to what Adi was saying, that when you say constructive conflict, it's more like maker checker kind of a system wherein, there is one guy who is like the owner and then there is opinion needed for that to happen. And how do you, just out of curiosity, how do you, like, I know from outside, I know, and I may be completely wrong, that Reckitt is a very performance oriented company. What you said in terms of like selection is around having those winners. And if other people want to like quickly move out, that's okay. But how do you ensure that cultural alignment is there, or that, takes care of its own? We, for example, in a company, there will be people who are great performers, but are not scaling, let's say, from a seniority point of view. Is that all into consideration, or it's like performance matters?
So I think what happens. So first of all, the company I'm talking about is the company that existed a few years ago or many years ago, right? And every company evolves. So, and in every system there is good and bad. So even in the system that I told you about, there is of course some bad, because what ends up happening is that you end up creating a culture that can be quite aggressive, very performance driven, and therefore it may not be as inclusive to people who are not driving that performance. It also may be very direct to people who are passengers and not contributing. So what ends up happening in this kind of culture is that you end up with a culture that is pointed, that is sharp. And the thing about sharp things is they cut through crap and they kind of make things happen. But on the other hand, they can also be pointy, and if you are nice and cuddly, then it can be kind of it can poke you a bit, and you may not like that too much. So it depends on what kind of business you want to create. Anything that has an edge typically has a double edge. And in the case of Reckitt, I would say that because the culture was so important, and these cultures end up becoming aggressive in the sense that people who don't fit the culture tend to realize very quickly they don't fit the culture, and then you get a Marmite reputation. So the old Reckitt had a Marmite reputation. People loved it or people hated it. People who left Reckitt would say, what a bunch of terrible people. They're so aggressive. They're always aggressive. Anybody who competed with the old Reckitt would be like, oh my God, these people are crazy. But inside, you never realized that it was like that. If you fit the culture, you were like, this is fantastic. This is great. The business is growing. Everything is fine. We are providing such a great service to our consumers. We're having so much fun. So it depends on what you're looking for. And sometimes you have to be careful what you wish for, because if you dilute the culture too much, it makes... so think about it like this, right? The larger a population is, the more likely it is to be average. So what do I mean by this? If you think about Reckitt versus, let's say, P&G or Unilever, I would say, at the risk of my Unilever and P&G friends jumping on me, I would say in many markets during the heyday of Reckitt, when we competed with Unilever or even P&G, we were pretty sure that we are going to win this. It's not really that tough. And that sounds arrogant, and we were perhaps a bit arrogant. But what happens is, if you are a 100,000 people company like P&G, and you're a 30,000 person company like Reckitt, or you're like 1,000 person, 500 person company like Bombay Shaving Company, you're hiring from the same pool, which is the business schools or whatever. The more people you hire, the more likely that these people are going to become average. Because you can hire one Roger Federer. Can you hire like 50 Roger Federers? No, they don't exist. So can you train 50 people to become Roger Federer? No, maybe you can make 5 or 10, but also very difficult. So the Roger Federers of business, you cannot hire so many. If you hire 100,000, your company will become more average. So the only thing that differentiates large companies from each other, makes them better than the other, is the pointedness and the sharpness of the culture. Because everyone will say, I have better people. But the larger you are as a company, the more you are lying. You don't have better people. You cannot, statistically. You have a better culture.
And interestingly, you are saying
That's a very interesting way.
you have culture playbooks which can be implemented depending on what you choose.
Totally. And the culture is driven by the structure. So there's a fantastic book on system design. I forget the name, but I can share it later. In this book, the guy makes the argument that when you design a software system, the design of the software system typically reflects the design of the team of the organization that created it. So if you want to design your software situation in a particular way, you first design your team in that way. So what do I mean by this? Let's say there is something which has a front end, middleware, and back end. So let's say you have three teams that are in the front end, right? So one is doing, trimmers, one is doing grazers, one is doing something else. And then you have one team which is providing all of the supply chain. And then you have, maybe three teams at the back. Now, supposing you were to design supposing this is the team and you are designing this as a software that delivers, then you're going to have a software, an app which has a section for trimmers, a section for razors, a section for something. And you've created the product you create is the mirror of your organization. And you don't realize that. You think it's the other way around. But if you had done it differently, where you had a team that just said consumer experience, now you would have one interface and you would have fed trimmers, razors, whatever is needed, depending upon what that customer wanted.
That is so true. That is so true.
I really like Adi, you have a framework on this that I think most people are busy doing execution tasks on AI. What about the strategy part? I read that blog. I have somewhere gotten lost on the entity AI piece. I think there are many pieces. First, second पे इतने thoughts दे दिया आपने मुझे. मैंने बोला रुको पढ़ने दो मुझे.
No, I must apologize to people because actually for the first 6 months this year I was very busy with my Asgard stuff, but I was kind of writing on the side. Then suddenly I woke up one fine day and I basically started writing this thing, and then I said this is great fun. So I spent like 2 weeks doing it, and I've written something like 50,000 words already on this stuff, which is too much, right? I have to control this and kind of condense it. And this 25...
No, it's fascinating. It's provoking so much thought, so much thinking. It's quite fascinating. I've been downloading on my Remarkable and then reading.
Oh, wonderful.
Amazing.
Wonderful.